He is, of course, the Honourable Craig Murray, former British ambassador, and he joins me now on the line. Craig, thank you for joining us. I'm in The Hague now. It's after the Lord Mayor's show. The judgment hung heavily on Friday, but it's been so overtaken by events, hasn't it?
It has, but I think some of the reason for that is in the judgment. I think the judgment was a long way better than I expected it to be. And I think the lashing out at UNWRA and at the UN in particular is because of the judgment, and especially two things. Firstly, they wanted to distract attention from the judgment because Israel lost on every single count. And secondly, they wanted to discredit UNWRA because one key thing about the judgment is that the court made findings of fact. It found that there are facts which plausibly amount to genocide. And not just, it didn't just find that South Africa said these things, it found its own facts and said these facts amount plausibly to genocide. And those facts included statements by UNWRA. Statements by UNWRA were quite important facts behind the opinion of the ICJ. So I think it's no coincidence whatsoever that you immediately get these attacks on the integrity of UNWRA and this attempt to defund UNWRA, which of course also helps contribute to the genocide. It speeds up the genocide by contributing to starvation and despoliation.
Yes, I didn't see that one coming, I must say. Your friend is accused of genocide. A court, by an overwhelming majority, finds that you may very well be guilty of that genocide, makes demands of you to correct your behaviour, gives you a month to report, and effectively sends you to trial for genocide. And instead of distancing yourself for your own protection from your friend, you double down, because that's what this is. You double down on your support for the accused, and you yourself embark on a course of action which may very well leave you in the dock for genocide. That's friendship for you, isn't it, Craig?
It's extraordinary. The hold that the Zionist lobby has over the political class in the UK, as you know better than anyone, George, is just incredibly strong. And I certainly didn't see that coming. And the coordinated and fast response, because governments, as again you know, governments do not make policy decisions in 20 minutes. They for all these governments to come in one after the other within a matter of a couple of hours, withdrawing finance from UNWRA, that must have been coordinated in advance and have been up the sleeve, if you like, as a reaction to the ICJ judgment. So we're at levels of evil here which are astonishing. You've got the ICJ detailing the starvation and deprivation and deaths and the terrible conditions in which people are living. You've got the UN spelling it out in great detail, all reported in the ICJ opinion. And then you've got action taken deliberately to increase starvation. It's so evil. I'm struggling to come to terms with it.
Yes, me too. I know UNWRA very well. Over decades, I have known them well in the refugee camps in Lebanon, first of all, which I first attended in 1977, and of course in Gaza, where they are literally the difference between life and death for millions of people. They provide the food, they provide the medicine, they provide the schools, they provide the funding for the basic levels of health that exist in normal times. And now our government, the governments of our closest allies, have pooled the funding. I'm almost lost for words about it.
Yeah. No, it's simply astonishing. It's evil. It's the only only word that is for it. It's an act of evil, and it's an act of petulance in part as well, because they are really angry about the international system and the International Court of Justice standing up to them in a way which they didn't expect, I think. And they had contingency plans in place, and I assume they had a few days' warning of the way the court was going. But I think they were very confident that they'd be able to lean on the ICJ and get their way, and the ICJ has stood up to them. And I think it's so unusual for them to have the Zionist narrative contradicted bluntly in this way, that they're reacting in anger and emotion.
And in perfect synchronicity. I mean, one used to expect the United States to be fully behind Israel, the United Kingdom to be not quite as fully, but still pretty much, and countries like New Zealand and so on, likely to take a much less supportive stand. Countries like France, sometimes not supportive at all. But they moved like it was like an episode of Come Dancing.
It's true. It's astonishing, and on such a flimsy pretext. I mean, you've got this organisation which employs 30,000 people. It employs 14,000 people in Gaza, of whom 12 are alleged to have taken part in events on the 7th of October. And that's alleged by the Israelis. Nothing has been proven yet. Those poor people, one of them has already been killed by the Israelis. The others have been sacked before the investigation, which says something about, the kind of justice at play here. And this is a minuscule proportion of the staff of UNWRA, even were it true. Would you close down the US post office because it had 20 criminals in it? It's just, as a pretext, it just doesn't add up. It's quite astonishing. And for so many countries to all act in concert on such a ludicrously flimsy pretext is it's something which I think future historians will puzzle over.
And yet the BBC, I saw you commenting on this, went for it hook, line and sinker. It became, having ignored the result here in The Hague, they went nap in horse racing terms, in bookies terms. They went nap on this, I think, hoax over UNWRA. Our journalists our broadcasters have completely lost any sense of integrity, it seems to me.
Yeah, I don't see how any honourable person can continue working for the BBC. And I would say to our listeners that I don't see how any honourable person can continue paying their television licence. And that is something people can do. It wasn't just the lead item on the news. It was 8 minutes long in a news bulletin. And as you know, it's very, very unusual to have a single item that's 8 minutes long on the main news bulletin. Normally, items are 2 or 3 minutes long at most, and often they're a matter of seconds. 8 minutes of propaganda. And of course, it gives them the excuse to retail all the rather dubious atrocity stories of 7 October all over again. It was massively more. It was 3 or 4 times the time they gave to the ICJ opinion that Israel is possibly guilty of genocide, plausibly guilty of genocide, and that 25 to 30,000 people are dead. And instead, they had 8 minutes on this sacking of 12 people. It's just astonishing. It absolutely beggars belief.
Now, help me on this, Excellency. the leader of the opposition is a King's Counsel. Sir Keir Starmer, KC, King's Counsel. He's a human rights lawyer. He's never done opining on all manner of apparently or allegedly illegal acts by some countries, principally Russia. And he's ready to do that live on television without being in possession of all the facts or necessarily even any of the facts. But he has been completely silent on a finding of the ICJ against a country that he has pledged his support without qualification. He's living up to that promise, isn't he?
It's sickening. And the degree of humiliation he's prepared to go through in order to maintain a sort of record of 100% loyalty to Israel. I'm sure you saw the interview where he was asked about the civilian being shot dead while carrying a white flag. And he was asked point blank, is it a war crime to shoot dead an unarmed civilian holding a white flag? And he said, oh, well, I can't tell. You know, you shouldn't ask politicians to give off-the-cuff answers. I need to see more evidence, blah, blah, which is ludicrous. I mean, it's frankly shameful. And at no stage has he been prepared to call out any of the obvious Israeli war crimes, including when they shot dead 3 of their own hostages who were unarmed and carrying a white flag. It's really quite astonishing. And we have the Labour Party today with Lisa Nandy saying she supports the cutting of finance to UNWRA. And then I presume after a substantial reaction from their membership, their position now is that they support ending the finance to UNWRA, but that the flow of aid ought not to be interrupted, which makes no sense whatsoever. They just tie themselves in the most ludicrous of knots in order and humiliate themselves in order to avoid any criticism of Israel whatsoever. And finally, on that, as we know, 40% of shadow cabinet members are financed by the Zionist lobby.
40%. And they've just sacked another MP this evening, Kate Ossamore, for the crime, for the thought crime, for the crime of words. They've sacked her for daring to raise in the same weekend the Holocaust and the other Holocaust that is underway in Gaza. I mean, what but a Holocaust is 65,000 wounded, 30,000 dead, thousands still under the rubble, famine, pestilence, and disease, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. What but a Holocaust is that? And yet, for daring, although not as eloquently, to even hint that that might be so, this long-standing Labour MP, a black woman MP, the kind of MP they changed all their rules to ensure there were more of, she's now joined the first ever black woman MP, Diane Abbott, on the bench of ex-Labour MPs. It seems that there's no stopping the Labour Friends of Israel.
Well, I mean, in the Keir Starmer's Labour Party, you can get expelled for agreeing with the International Court of Justice. That's what it boils down to. And that's simply an astonishing state of affairs. I mean, this is not the Labour Party in any meaningful sense whatsoever. It's no longer the Labour Party. It is now a second Conservative Party, which is every bit as right-wing as the first Conservative Party.
Well, Honourable Craig Murray, we can always rely on you, not just for honesty, but for wisdom. Thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows.